Yeah, I mean, I know what you've been watching, but you don't need it. You don't need to watch it because we've got everything that you need right here. We've got meaningful debate. We've got winners. We've got losers. We've got a big-time college football weekend coming up, Mr. Rivers.
Did you just put him in when you said loser?
General direction.
Oh,
could have been you. Could have been anyone in the studio.
Not offended, just checking. Now, again, I said that I thought Ole Miss had the weapons to expose Alabama. Does Ole Miss think they have the weapons to expose Alabama? But the biggest question is, how will Ole Miss try to implement some type of run attack against Alabama?
You remember Nick Saban in the offseason, he kept saying, you know, when we gained something last year, all those points, all those stats, when we gained something, we lost something. Well, in the first game, they could have done whatever they wanted to do, basically. In the second game, ditto. This is really where you find out where the rubber meets the road with that statement. Because this is your opportunity. You've got the backfield, you've got the offensive line, at least in terms of run blocking, to run it at will, if that is your desire, if that's what you're committed to.
If you're down on Jeremy Johnson right now, you should be.
I'm listening.
Because he hadn't played well. But if you think that Auburn can go into Death Valley and beat LSU without throwing the football, you're sadly mistaken. What about the crowd noise? And for everybody that says they have a chance against LSU because it's not at night, stop talking to me. I don't want to hear that crap, all right? Crowd noise, penalties, audibles, all of these different factors and variables will go into how Auburn plays.
Time of kickoff, a pretty emotional subject for you there, huh?
Because it's not a night game. We got LSU. Are you kidding me?
You know, they do overblow that down there.
Are you kidding me?
It's like their birthright to play at night. Suck it up. You're the game of the week. Be proud. Let's stay there. I want to know what wins Saturday. Does gut win or does history win? Because my gut, having watched Auburn through the first 2 weeks of the season and having watched LSU last week, which contrary to very popular belief out there was a very good win at Mississippi State, my gut tells me there's no way in the world Auburn's going to go down there and compete. LSU should physically blow Auburn off the field. That's what my gut tells me. My gut tells me they're way too inconsistent offensively. My gut tells me they don't have the defensive depth to hold up for 4 quarters against LSU. That's what my gut tells me. History tells me this is when shockers happen. The kind of principle that applies with that Auburn-LSU game applies here as well. Terrible loss for South Carolina this week, or last week rather. And so with that terrible loss for South Carolina last week, you think to yourself, Georgia should really own this game. But then especially with this series, you know what history tells you. So we'll see there. In my mind, there's a very, very narrow, low margin for error type path to victory here for South Carolina, and it would probably involve winning special teams, winning the turnover battle +2 or more, and they would need to find a crack in Georgia's defense that hasn't been exposed so far. And I would think the only one they're capable of potentially exposing, if it is there, is a run defense crack.
You're going to have to get production from your quarterback. And when I say good play, what I mean is you have to be above average and you have to be able to throw the ball to your guys and make plays when you're called upon. You can throw the ball 15 times a game, Josh, go 11 for 15 for 195 yards, 2 touchdowns, and be exactly what you needed that day.
You heard of a tribute band, right? Yeah. A tribute band is a band that goes around just playing the hits of their favorite band. Johnny Buckets basically has a tribute poll to the JP poll. It's called the Buckets List. It's very well named. And in his tribute poll, he's given the Yellow Jackets a lot of love. So I want to know this weekend, is Notre Dame the first of potentially many victims for Georgia Tech? You may not think Georgia Tech is quite up to the level of being a national title contender, and that remains to be seen. But even if they're not, look at their schedule, because a lot of teams that are on their schedule. One is Notre Dame this weekend. They've also got to play at Clemson. They welcome in Florida State. They welcome in Georgia. They could wreck 1 season. They could wreck 4 seasons. Because I know we don't have an audience full of third graders.
It doesn't matter. Point them out. Listen, I think Georgia Tech is a good team. Now, we know you picked Virginia Tech to win the ACC, and I picked Florida State. Georgia Tech is a team that you're going to have trouble dealing with offensively. That's the truth of the matter.
J.C. Shurburtt. J.C., we got a lot to talk about with Week 3, but before we get there, I don't think I've ever seen more panic. I don't think I've ever seen the sky falling more on a 2-0 team than I'm seeing just to our west in Lee County, Alabama right now. Auburn, 2-0, but a lot of concern there. You were very high on the Auburn Tigers in the preseason. You've seen them through 2 games now. What's your assessment?
I'm still high on Auburn, you know, until they lose or until they have a game where they don't pull out a victory. You know, I think I'd be remiss not to. I don't think it's a particularly healthy football team right now. Obviously, there's been struggles at quarterback with Jeremy Johnson. I think he's an example through 2 games, and I'm not saying that'll be this way through the whole season. That sometimes off-season hype can kind of bite you a little bit.
I've heard a lot of people, especially in Alabama, corners of the world, expecting a tied, comfortable win. I think they're living in a fantasy world. How do you see this one playing out?
I pretty much believe that this will be a relatively close ball game. Ole Miss scored 149 points in its first two games. That's not going to happen Saturday. They're playing against the best defense in the country, or one of them. Ole Miss certainly has a good offense. I think it's the Ole Miss defense that will keep them in this game. I expect a relatively low-scoring ball game. Alabama probably will win by 7 to 10 points, but it'll be a competitive game, no doubt. And I think anybody expecting the Tide to roll completely over the Rebels probably has another thing coming on Saturday.
This Saturday, how important is that game, aside from the obvious reasons? How important is South Carolina at Georgia for Steve Spurrier and for the overall state and health of that program?
Well, I think certainly a win at Georgia would calm the masses a little bit, but of course they beat Georgia last year and still had some of the same problems haunt them throughout the season. South Carolina's problems are not based on winning or losing one or two ball games. They're systematic. There has been a decline in the recruiting there. There have been misses on highly regarded guys, which indicates a player development issue. There's just all kinds of issues there that, quite frankly, we all sort of pointed to as a possibility when most of Spurrier's good assistant coaches left, around 2011, 2012, and they were replaced with guys with, quite frankly, lesser resumes, or guys were promoted from within. Steve Spurrier is a great coach, Hall of Fame coach. I anticipate South Carolina will play very well this weekend. Are they going to be able to beat the dogs between the hedges? Well, sometimes they don't do that when they have good teams, like 2 years ago when Georgia handed them one of two losses. So, it's just going to have to all play out with regards to the future of the program and where they go beyond Spurrier, or does he stay and make staff changes, or do they turn it around and have a great year? It's still a lot of unknown in Columbia at this point with regards to the head ball coach.
Oklahoma at Tennessee, really hard-fought ball game. Vols let it get away from them late. Scratch that. Oklahoma takes it away from Tennessee late. I was kind of the opinion a lot more praise should be heaped on Oklahoma than criticism on Tennessee. It hurts to let a lead that big slip away, but you picked Tennessee, as did I, to win the East preseason. Coming out of that one, also factoring in the injuries, how do you feel about Tennessee now?
Well, I'm going to quote the Big Lebowski. It's a league game, dude. League games are more important when you're Tennessee right now, and certainly they had an opportunity that slipped away from them to beat a storied program in Oklahoma at home in front of a great crowd. But the more important games are the league games, and Florida in a couple of weeks, I think, is much more of a measuring stick. They've lost to the Gators 10 years in a row. There's been no reason for that. Tennessee can really turn it back around if they can win in Gainesville, and that's the game that I think, as a program, that they desperately need. It wasn't the game with the Sooners.
Many comments here on the sexiness of that new background that you have. Obviously, the foreground has always been great, but the background, a lot of the Shurbys here in Columbus are digging it. And let me say this, by the way, before you leave. What Donnie Van Zant was to 38 Special, he is to 247 Sports. J.C. Shurburtt, check out his work, 247sports.com. As always, sir, enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you next Wednesday.
Thanks, Josh.
Here at the Wall of Fame, Jonathan Rivers seated close by at the desk of shame. It's confidence pick time. There he is. Wave to the world, Mr. Rivers. And Ole Miss at Alabama. Looked at this more today, Mr. Rivers. I thought to myself, can a team really go into Tuscaloosa, Alabama, not being able to run the ball effectively and beat Alabama? My answer is no. Flip that one. Alabama now at 2. Auburn at LSU. Feeling more confident about this one by the hour. We talked about history versus gut earlier tonight. I'm taking gut. LSU wins this one.
So I don't sway day by day. I'm pretty convicted in my picks. So you look at Georgia Tech, I've got them at 8 over Notre Dame on the road. I want to go down to the Auburn LSU game because I sort of bypassed it last night. I want to tell you the reason why I have LSU at 9. If Auburn had played their best games, the first 2 games of the season, this might be LSU 3 or LSU 4. Because I think LSU from top to bottom is more talented than Auburn. They're going to be playing at home, and I think they have more depth. But because of the way Auburn has played, it gives me reason to believe that 9 will be the lowest I go in this matchup in Baton Rouge.